Now, the United Kingdom appears to be crumbling under an infrastructure crisis. Now, first it was the schools that were in the spotlight over the dilapidated buildings. But now, in the latest development, it's not just the schools, but even the NHS has warned that hospitals should in fact be ready for evacuation because of the crumbling concrete crisis. Now, remember, in the 1940s, the sun never set on the British Empire. But now, the United Kingdom appears to be in desperate need of some strong concrete solutions to this crisis. Now, the concrete hospital buildings are barely holding it together. Many are reportedly at risk of collapse, and they could start to fall down pretty soon. Now, in response to this unprecedented situation in the United Kingdom, the National Health Service has told hospitals across the country to be ready to evacuate staff and patients as and when needed. Now, the Healthcare Administration has also issued these instructions to all 224 health trusts. Now, the move has come in the wake of an uproar over reinforced aerated autoclaved concrete, or RAAC, which has led to the closure of more than 100 schools so far. At least about 13 schools with RAAC have had the funding to rebuild under a Labour scheme. But the plans were scrapped by the Conservative-led government. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has in fact called for an urgent solution to this crisis.
Mr. Speaker, I know how concerned parents, children and teachers are, and I want to start by assuring them that the government is doing everything it can to fix this quickly and minimise the disruption to children's education. We make no apology for acting decisively in the face of new information. And let me provide the House with an update on where we are. Of the 22,000 schools in England, the vast majority won't be affected. In fact, in 2/3 of inspections of suspected schools, RAAC is not actually present.
Now, according to the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, the United Kingdom now has more than $12 million worth of backlog of repairs and remedial work. The latest analysis also raises some serious questions on whether this crisis could have been averted. Earlier, some former officials at the Department of Education had claimed that a request to fund work in more than 300 schools had been slashed to below 100 schools in 2020 and 2021. The decision was taken by the Treasury under the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak. Number 10 had rejected all of these claims. The material RAAC, that is, some form of aerated concrete, was widely used for the construction of schools and colleges from the 1950s until the 1990s. The reports in fact suggest that more than 150 schools and colleges are constructed out of aerated concrete. And these schools are on the verge of, in fact, shutting down these buildings altogether because of safety concerns, fearing that the aerated concrete is prone to collapsing any moment. This also has come at a time when millions of students in England are, of course, returning back to schools after their summer vacation. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what actually is this crisis that is unfolding in the United Kingdom, we're being joined by Mr. Clisman Murati, who's an economist and also the founder of Pareto Economics, a global world affairs research consultancy, is joining us live from London. Now, Mr. Murati, this almost sounds bizarre. Firstly, it was reported that schools and certain college buildings may be at risk of collapsing because they were constructed out of what is known as aerated concrete. And now the NHS has issued warning that many of its hospitals could also be at a similar risk. What exactly is happening in the United Kingdom?
The first thing I think we need to do is stop calling everything a crisis, because once you add the label of crisis, it causes urgency and anxiety and panic within the populace. And it also rushes solutions which need to be thought out much more carefully for there to be constructive, applicable solutions in the long run, as opposed to just thinking it's a crisis and we need to do something rushed now. Second thing we have to realize is that infrastructure takes a long time to build and a long time for things to go wrong with it. So I think it's hardly Rishi Sunak's fault for something which has been built, as you mentioned in your own package, from the 1950s until the 1990s. So this is a historical problem that is now seeing ramifications of buildings which were not built to fit. Naturally, Rishi Sunak, being the Prime Minister, he needs to be able to take leadership of the situation and provide solutions. Given the fact that next year is an election year also, so what he doesn't want to have happen is Labour Party dangling this as a failed policy response to the current situation. And also, it's happening at a very difficult time when kids are coming back to school now. Schools are closing down. There needs to be a whole logistical shift, which is going to cause disruptions in children's education, as if education disruptions during COVID wasn't bad enough. So a lot of things happening at the same time. Absolutely, indeed. Now, as you, of course, pointed out, that this is something that's happened over a period of several decades, and infrastructure is not going to just come up, overnight. So how does Britain intend to solve this crisis? Well, first of all, the government needs to have a focus on improving infrastructure wholesale. That's a conversation which is happening across the world, even for countries which are advanced in their economies and countries which are emerging in their economies. Building, rebuilding, and creating new infrastructure is something which every single country has a focus on. But when it comes time to the financial realities of doing this, they're obviously constricted by many different factors. Budget allocation being the main one, due to other competing needs in the economy, as well as how the markets are doing in regards to interest rates and inflation and what it would cost essentially to do this. But for sure, infrastructure needs to be something, and it has actually, in fact, been a key component of the government's focus. But when it comes time to focusing on public sector infrastructure, that needs to be much more focused upon. Absolutely, indeed. But when we are talking about schools and colleges, we're dealing with something so fundamental that this is something that's used day in and day out by young students and patients who need to visit hospitals. How much of an election issue is this likely to become, considering that elections are next year? Well, God forbid something were to go wrong and a school were to collapse or a hospital were to, partly go wrong or collapse, that would make it a focal issue. And it would be strictly on the shoulders of Rishi Sunak, even more so to respond. So it depends on, again, what's happening across the world. Again, this is another news item which has come up in the last week or so. So this could be something which could just die off in the news cycle and people focus on other things, or it could be systemically important. It depends on how much of a focus the government puts on this and also what's happening across the world, which will also impact the attention of voters and also the priorities of the politicians. Absolutely, indeed. It is the priority of the government that will be checked here. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Murati, for joining us and getting us that perspective there. Thank you.